A retired black female captain is silently harassed by police for weeks. When they finally trap her on a secluded path, they don't know an unseen eye in the sky is recording everything. The salt-laced wind of Port Blossom was supposed to be a bomb. For Captain Eva Rostova, 65 and retired from a world of classified shadows, this quiet seaside town was meant to be the epilogue to a life written in conflict. Here, the only intelligence she wanted to gather was the tide schedule, the only threat the occasional seagull trying to steal a sandwich. But peace, she knew, was a territory, and in America, some were never allowed to claim it uncontested. The harassment began not with a bang, but with a whisper of tires on asphalt. It was a police cruiser, parked at the end of her street, angled just so. An observation post. Eva, formerly of U.S. Army military intelligence, recognized the tactic instantly. It wasn't patrol, it was presence. A silent, constant reminder that she was being watched. Her partner in this quiet life was Ghost, a Belgian Malinois with eyes the color of whiskey and a soul forged in the dust of Kandahar. He was her last partner from her final tour, a living extension of her will, trained not just to obey but to anticipate. He felt the shift before she did. His ears would prick, a low rumble vibrating in his chest, his gaze fixed on the cruiser long before it came into her view. Inside the car were the new arbiters of Port Blossom's tranquility, Sergeant Cutler, a man who wore a polished smile like a weapon, Officer Dean, whose restless energy vibrated with a need for confrontation, and the rookie, Officer Parks, a boy swimming in a uniform, his eyes darting between his superiors, desperate for approval. They never spoke. For weeks, the campaign was one of suffocating silence. The cruiser would appear during her morning walk with Ghost along the coastline. It would idle outside the grocery store. It would be parked across from the library. They were ghosts of a different kind, haunting her steps, their message clear: you don't belong here. The town, once a collection of friendly nods and casual conversations, began to change. Her neighbors, the Hendersons, suddenly found their hedges fascinating whenever she walked by. The clerk at the post office, who used to joke with her, now focused intently on his computer screen, his answers clipped. It was a social quarantine, and the officers were the disease. Eva knew the strategy. It was psychological warfare, designed to isolate, to provoke, to create a narrative where her eventual reaction would be painted as the cause, not the effect. They wanted her to snap, to yell, to give them a reason. An angry black woman was a story they knew how to sell. A calm, analytical retired army captain was an equation they couldn't solve. She didn't alter her routine. Weakness is an invitation, and Eva Rostova had not sent an invitation in 40 years. But she adapted. Her walks became threat assessments. She noted blind spots, camera locations, witness density. She was an intelligence officer on her own soil, profiling the very people who were supposed to protect it. The rage was there, a cold, hard knot in her chest, but she compartmentalized it, filed it away. Emotion was a liability. Observation was a weapon. One evening, she made a choice. For weeks, she had stuck to the populated beachfront. Tonight, she turned inland, toward the winding, secluded path that snaked around the old, abandoned military fort overlooking the bay. It was a quiet place, a place of memory. And a perfect place for an ambush. She knew they would follow. The predator always follows when the prey separates from the herd. She wasn't running into a trap. She was walking in to spring it. As she rounded the first bend, the familiar crunch of gravel behind her was replaced by the low, predatory purr of the cruiser's engine. They were done whispering. The silence was about to break. The path was narrow, flanked by crumbling stone walls on one side and a steep, wooded drop-off on the other. The cruiser pulled up behind her, its headlights cutting through the deepening twilight, pinning her and Ghost in a stark, interrogative glare. The engine cut, and the sudden silence was more menacing than the sound had been. Doors opened and closed with sharp, metallic clicks. Sergeant Cutler emerged first, his movements slow and deliberate, the picture of calm authority. Officer Dean followed, bouncing on the balls of his feet, his hand resting on his baton. The rookie, Parks, stayed near the car, a nervous silhouette against the headlights. "Captain Rostova," Cutler called out, his voice smooth and laced with a false deference that made Eva's skin crawl. "A little late for a walk on this old trail, isn't it?" Eva turned slowly, placing herself so Ghost was slightly behind her leg. She didn't respond to the question. She simply waited. Analysis required data, and she was letting them provide it. "Just concerned for your safety," Cutler continued, taking a step forward. "It's isolated out here. Anything could happen." "I'm aware of my surroundings, Sergeant," Eva replied, her voice even, devoid of the fear they were trying to cultivate. Officer Dean chuckled, a harsh, grating sound. "Your dog seems nervous," he said, eyeing Ghost. "That the kind of dog people get when they're hiding something?" The provocation was clumsy, obvious. Eva's gaze remained fixed on Cutler, the architect of this encounter. "He's the kind of partner you get when you've served your country. He's trained to recognize a threat." That was the spark. Dean's smirk widened. "Is that right? So what's he see right now?" He took another, deliberate step forward, crossing the invisible line of personal space, his hand reaching out not to touch her, but to gesture dismissively toward Ghost. It was a test of dominance, an invasion meant to force a reaction. Eva didn't move a muscle. She didn't raise her voice. She let out a single, sharp, low-toned command, a word forged in the heat and pressure of a war zone. "Barrier." It wasn't a shout, but the effect was like a thunderclap. In a movement too fast to properly track, Ghost exploded from behind her leg. He didn't bark, he didn't growl, he didn't bite. He executed a perfect tactical maneuver, planting his feet and positioning his body sideways between Eva and Officer Dean, forming a living wall of muscle and sinew. His head was low, his eyes locked on Dean's hand, his entire body a rigid statement of non-negotiable defense. He was a shield, not a weapon, and the sheer discipline of the act was more terrifying than any snarl. Dean froze mid-step, his hand hovering in the air. He stumbled back, his bravado vanishing. "What the hell?" Cutler's hand dropped to his holster. "Call off your dog, ma'am. Now." The civility was gone, replaced by a raw edge of panic. "He hasn't touched your officer," Eva stated calmly. "He simply established a boundary your officer was about to cross. That's an attack on a police officer." Cutler blustered, trying to regain control. "No," Eva said, her voice cutting through his panic. "That was a lesson in de-escalation. Something you three clearly missed in your training." She looked past them, up into the darkening sky. "Besides, I don't think your version of events is the one people are going to see." Cutler frowned, confused. "What are you talking about?" Eva tilted her head slightly, her gaze fixed on a point high above them. "You might want to look up, Sergeant," she said, her voice now laced with a cold, triumphant clarity. "Because for the last 5 minutes, you haven't had an audience of one. You've had two." Confused, the officers followed her gaze. At first, they saw nothing but the first stars pricking the velvet sky. Then, Parks, the rookie, pointed a trembling finger. "Sarge, what is that?" There, hovering almost silently, was a small, dark shape with a single, blinking red light. A drone. In that instant, the world shifted. The isolation of the path vanished. The power of their badges flickered and died. They weren't holding a woman captive anymore. They were actors on a stage, their every move, every threat, every violation captured by an unseen, unbiased eye. The trap had been sprung, but it was they who were caught inside it. 2 miles away, a 16-year-old named Leo sat in his bedroom, his heart hammering against his ribs. He stared at the footage streaming to his laptop from the drone, his dream of capturing cinematic coastline shots forgotten. What he had instead was raw, undeniable truth. He saw the cruiser cornering the woman he recognized as Captain Rostova. He saw the officers encircle her. He saw the aggressive posture, the reaching hand, and the incredible, disciplined movement of the dog. He saw the officers' faces shift from arrogant confidence to pure panic when they spotted his drone. He knew, with the gut-sinking certainty of youth, that he had recorded something that people were not meant to see. For an hour, he wrestled with what to do. Then, thinking of his own grandmother, who walked her small dog on those same paths, he made a decision. He uploaded the raw, 5-minute clip to YouTube, titling it simply, Port Blossom Police Corner Female Veteran on Mission Trail. He wrote no commentary. The footage spoke for itself. By morning, the video had become a firestorm. It wasn't just local, it was national. The hashtag barrier began to trend, a tribute to Ghost's disciplined defense. The digital world did what the real world had failed to do, it bore witness. But in Port Blossom, the reaction was a schism that split the town down the middle. One morning, Eva found a bouquet of sunflowers on her porch with a simple, unsigned note, "Thank you for standing." The next, she found the word "liar" spray-painted in crude red letters across her fence. The town's quiet civility shattered. At the grocery store, people either met her eyes with a nod of solidarity or stared intently at cereal boxes to avoid her gaze. The conflict wasn't just on a screen anymore, it was in the aisles, on the sidewalks, in the strained silence of a community forced to confront an ugliness it had long pretended did not exist. Eva became a symbol, a role she had never asked for. To some, she was a hero, a woman who had calmly faced down a corrupt system. To others, she was a provocateur, an agitator who had brought unwanted national scrutiny to their peaceful town. The most painful part wasn't the open hostility, but the silence from those she had considered friends. Their refusal to take a side, their quiet retreat into the comfort of neutrality, was a betrayal that cut deeper than any spray-painted slur. The video had given her a voice, but it had also imprisoned her in a narrative she couldn't control, making her a stranger in her own home. The call came late, just after 10, when the house was dark and the only sound was the wind off the ocean. The number was blocked. Eva almost didn't answer, but her instincts told her to. Captain Rostova. The voice on the other end was female, professional, and carried an undercurrent of exhaustion. "This is Sergeant Miller. We haven't met. I work out of the main precinct." Eva's mind raced. Sergeant Miller. A black woman, same rank as Cutler. Eva had seen her name on internal memos years ago. A quiet, competent officer who had navigated the treacherous internal politics of the department. "I'm calling unofficially," Miller said, her voice low. "Off the record. First, I want to say I'm sorry for what Cutler's crew put you through. Second, I want to say thank you." "Thank you for what?" Eva asked, her voice wary. "For having my life turned upside down." "No," Miller replied, a hint of steel in her tone. "Thank you for giving us proof. Captain, Cutler and his crew have been a problem for years. We've had dozens of informal complaints, illegal stops, verbal harassment, intimidation, all targeting people of color. But it was always their word against his. There was never anything concrete. Nothing that would survive an internal review." A heavy silence hung between them. "That drone," Miller continued, "that video, it isn't just a clip. It's the crack in the dam. It's undeniable, and it corroborates everything we've suspected." Eva leaned against her kitchen counter, the cold stone a stark contrast to the heat rising in her chest. "So what happens now?" "That depends on you," Miller said. "The DA's office is willing to open a formal investigation, but only with a primary witness who is willing to testify. The video is powerful, but they need your voice to give it context. They need you." The request landed with the force of a physical blow. "Testify. Go public. Put her life, her career, her reputation on a stand to be dissected by lawyers who would paint her as an angry, unstable aggressor. They'll try to destroy you," Miller said bluntly, as if reading her mind. "They'll say you provoked them. They'll use your military background against you, claim you're trained in aggression. And they'll use my race as a motive for my defiance, Eva finished, the words tasting like ash. Yes, Miller said softly. They will. But you won't be alone this time. Eva looked at Ghost, who sat at her feet, his head resting on her shoes, a silent, steady anchor. She thought of the fear in the rookie's eyes, the hatred in Dean's, the smug certainty in Cutler's. And she thought of the silence of her neighbors. The system didn't just need a crack. It needed to be broken open. Tell the district attorney I'll testify, Eva said, her voice no longer weary, but forged into something new. Something sharp. The courtroom was a theater of sterile neutrality, designed to make passion feel out of place. But Eva Rostova brought her own quiet fire. When she took the stand, she was not a victim asking for pity. She was an intelligence officer delivering a report. Calmly, precisely, she didn't just recount the events, she dismantled them. She analyzed the officer's tactics, the pattern of life, surveillance, the isolation of the target, the escalating psychological pressure, the attempt to provoke a disproportionate response. She used the vocabulary of her profession to describe their crude, prejudiced police work, and in doing so, she stripped them of their power. The jury saw not an emotional woman, but a formidable expert. The verdict, when it came, felt both like an earthquake and an inevitability. Guilty. On all counts of official misconduct and harassment. A wave of gasps rippled through the courtroom. Sergeant Cutler's polished facade finally cracked, his face turning a blotchy red. Officer Dean stared at the jury in disbelief. The rookie, Parks, simply wept. Eva did not smile. She felt a slow, profound release, like a muscle that had been clenched for a lifetime finally letting go. The true victory, however, came a week later. On a bright, windswept morning, Captain Eva Rostova walked the trail by the old fort again. Ghost trotted at her side, his leash hanging looped in her hand, unused. She reached the spot where they had cornered her, and she paused, breathing in the salty air. This time, it tasted of freedom. As she continued her walk, a family a short distance behind her, who had once hurried past, slowed their pace, maintaining a respectful distance. They weren't just walking. They were watching over her. Her quiet act of refusal had redrawn the map of her town. She hadn't just reclaimed a path, she had reclaimed her peace. Eva's story proves that the most powerful resistance is sometimes the refusal to be erased. What do you believe is true strength? Is it loud defiance, or the quiet, unwavering dignity to hold your ground? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and please, always engage with respect.